We've got Daniel Jeremiah, NFL Network lead draft analyst, crunching 300 some odd guys into his brain for another year here. And Daniel, we've got to start here as far as your top 50 prospects, which I know you put your initial list out a little while back, and the three positions that had the highest number of prospects: corner with 7, offensive tackle with 8, and wide receiver with 11, which is music to the ears of Bills fans who know they're picking 28th and probably realize Gabe Davis might get priced out of their range with their cap issues that they have. Question for you is, how far do you feel the quality receiver depth carries through day 2 and day 3?
Well, I think it definitely carries through day 2. I mean, I think you can find second and third round wide receivers that can come in and play and be impactful right away. I mean, it's kind of a, wash, rinse, repeat. The colleges, that's just what we're getting. It goes all the way, all the way back to high school, 7-on-7, and then every college running a spread offense and chucking it all over the place. That I feel like every year we've got just a ridiculous number of wideouts.
Well, we'll get to some of those wideouts later in this interview, but we want to talk about depth in this draft class overall. And if you look at Buffalo's defensive line, 8 of the 12 defensive linemen that were on contract last season, only 8 of them, 4 of them are under contract for this upcoming season.
Yeah.
So that means you have 8 free agents. So Buffalo's going to have to address that spot in the draft and probably free agency. We know free agency is around the corner first, but they could address that spot in the draft as well. So can you help us by looking at the defensive line class that we have and compare and contrast the edge rushers and the defensive tackles coming out of this year's draft?
Sure. I think when you start with the edge rushers, to me there's 3 guys that kind of separate themselves from the bunch. And I don't think Buffalo's going to see any of the 3. So the last of which would be, sorry, I apologize officially. But Latu from UCLA would be the one, just because of some medical stuff. He had been medically retired at Washington before he got to UCLA. So just seeing how he comes through that process, that would be the only one I think, maybe very small chance he would be there. But Dallas Turner's going to be gone. Jared Verse is going to be gone. So you're looking at like Chop Robinson, potentially from Penn State could be an option there. Denarius Robinson from Missouri. Those are kind of those guys in that mix. And then defensive tackle-wise, I think there's a chance you have somebody there.
Yeah.
It's not a deep group of defensive tackles, but I think of that top group, you've got Murphy from Texas. He'll likely be gone. Newton from Illinois is possible. I think that's an area where you could see potentially him being still there. But it's not, to get to your question, I don't think either one of those positions, when we talk about receiver, if it's close and you have a receiver versus either a defensive tackle or an edge rusher, take the defensive tackle or the edge rusher. You can get the receiver later on, but it's going to fall off a cliff when you look at those defensive lines.
All right, well, that kind of gives us an idea on which way Brandon might be leaning at the end of round 1, especially knowing his propensity to take defensive linemen and his history in round 1. Safety is a position that looks like it's going to be experiencing turnover for the first time in a long time for the Bills. We know Micah Hyde is probably contemplating retirement, among other things, as far as his career is concerned. He's not under contract. Jordan Poyer has a big cap number, and it's not certain if he is a full-time safety or if is he a sub-package linebacker kind of guy, which is a role he filled this past year when Milano got hurt. So there's some stuff in the state of flux there, and they got a couple of other free agents at the position too. I'm expecting Bean to address safety and free agency because it is a chock-full class of veteran free agents. But what about the draft and safety talent, maybe day 2, day 3? Is there not guys to step in and start, but maybe guys to backfill their roster, knowing Brandon's probably going free agency route? Yeah,
your options are much greater in free agency. The draft-wise this year, I don't have a safety in my top 50.
Yeah, I saw that.
So you get to me, Newbins is from Minnesota. He's got a chance to go in the top 50.
He's a
got
nice player.
A ton of production. So that would be the one I would say that wouldn't shock me if he landed somewhere in there. We'll see how these guys work out and run, and maybe somebody will launch themselves up into that mix. But you've got Kinchins from Miami. He's an interesting one. He's kind of right there in that mix. You got Bullard from Georgia. You got Tyke Smith, the other safety, who I kind of like as a depth piece later on. So there's going to be guys. I mean, that's the good news is if you're saying I'm not looking for a starter, I'm looking for somebody that can kind of backfill and play on teams and get in maybe some sub packages and find a role on the team. That's what this safety class is.
Okay.
Well, we've heard about wide receiver at length already, especially the top three guys. We know the Bills won't be around for those top three guys, but wide receiver has been a popular position mocked to the Bills at number 28 because you could see a few guys still hanging around there in the late 20s, depending on when the other wide receivers start to go, aside from Rome Odunze, Malik Neighbors, and Marvin Harrison Jr. Brian Thomas Jr. has been a popular name mocked to the Bills at number 28. I feel like he's just got a great body of work, a true talented wide receiver with some versatility to him. Had a lot of touchdowns
More than
during
anybody.
his time at LSU. So does he have true number one potential? What do you think the Bills would get in a wide receiver like that, and how would you see him fitting into Buffalo's scheme?
Sure, I'll get to that in just 1 second. This is what I love about the Combine, by the way. Because I'm just sitting here, we're having a good conversation, and Joe Shane's over the Giants, and he just sees me and gives me the head nod. I give him the head nod, and we both go about our interviews. That's what's so great about it. Buffalo's own Joe Shane. But to me, look, Brian Thomas is easy. Like, to me, we'll get a chance to see him show a more variety of routes out here when he works out, as well as his pro day, because he didn't have to do a bunch of different routes there at LSU. It was death by slot fade with those guys. I mean, they just won vertically time after time after time. But he's fast, he's smooth, he can go up and get it, play above the rim down there in the red zone. So I'd be curious as we get through the process. I don't think he'll be there when Buffalo picks. If he is, that might be the one case where I'd fudge on my rule that I just told you about taking the defensive player. Well, holy cow, this guy's still there. I might take him. But no, a really, really talented guy, man. He's so much fun to watch and so silky smooth. A lot of times when you're scouting, you get fast, stiff guys, and you get slow, smooth guys. You don't see fast, smooth guys very often, right? And he is one of those.
Fast and smooth. Adonai Mitchell is a guy that transfers to Texas, wanted to be closer to his daughter, from what I understood, and that's why he made the transfer, because he's a Texas kid. Not a big body of work, but some big-time performances in some big-time games. Played on a Georgia team that kind of spread the wealth around, and it kind of ran through Bowers in the passing game for the better part of the last 3 years. So how do you evaluate a guy like that whose body of work isn't huge but has some big-time performances in some big-time games? I mean, that guy loved playing against Alabama. 2 touchdowns last year for Texas. He had the game-winning touchdown in the semifinal when he was back at Georgia against Alabama. How do you evaluate a guy like that?
He had an unbelievable catch against Washington this year, too, in the semifinal. So, look, the skills are all there. I think, to me, and you're going to see it, he is going to put on a show. He's going to run. He's going to run like crazy. He's going to jump out of the building. So he's going to help himself by what he does from the end of the season till we get to the draft. And to me, with him, it's just about, okay, can you get in private workouts, get a chance to just see more volume, see him run more routes, catch the ball. I didn't have any issues when I watched him. I'm like, I don't know where the hole is, other than the fact he just doesn't get a ton of work. But it's all in there. To me, he is a 20 to 35 guy. He's not gonna get out of the top of the second round. That's the floor for where he's gonna go, especially after he tests.
Another wide receiver that we've been seeing pop up in mock drafts heading to the Bills at number 28 is Troy Franklin. And he's a wide receiver that's a field stretcher. He can separate with his speed. He's got good versatility to him. But are there any concerns with his frame being around 180 pounds?
I wish he was bigger. I do. I mean, it's fascinating. We were going to have this discussion off of last year because we had so many lean frame guys, and we had, and then the funny part was I remember having conversations. We might have even done it on the podcast with Bucky, which was halfway through the year we're like, man, this is going to change everything because Tank Dell is tearing this league apart. Like nobody can cover.
Even Devontae Smith a couple of years earlier.
Yes, and then we get to the end of the year and Tank Dell's not playing anymore because he got hurt. And it's like that's the dilemma. Is that I'm not saying that you can't play and be successful as a lean light player. It's hard to stay on the field as a lean light
season now,
100%. So that goes into that evaluation, and it'll be interesting to see how much water weight he's carrying with him this week. I have a feeling he might be a little bit north of that number.
The other two parts of that University of Washington trio, I mean, I know you love Odunze. He's your favorite player in the draft. He's going to be long gone. But what about Polk and McMillan? How would you categorize those two in terms of receiver type, and would you call them consistent separators?
So I would say Polk's not really the separator. He's more kind of a bully, just real physical, 50-50 balls, tough and rugged after the catch as well. That's more his style. McMillan's probably more of a little quick in and out, separate type. You're probably say he'd be kind of in the Shakur mode.
Oh, okay.
You know, it's kind of like what you're trying to use him. That's how his role will look like at the next level, would be my guess. But yeah, I mean, those guys have played a lot of football. They're solid players, but you're right. I mean, the distance between Dunze and the other and those that's a healthy gap.
All right, fair enough. All right,
but it might cost you a little bit to get up to get a Dunze. I think that might be a little expensive.
That's not happening. Daniel, we know you're busy, and we're making the rounds here on Radio Row, so we appreciate the time. So thanks very much for doing it.
I enjoyed it.